Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of Black Magic Crafts DM Diaries. When I did the first one, I didn't know how well it would be received. Turns out the answer is very. Everybody seemed to love it, and I guess if people that didn't like it existed, well, they didn't complain, which is rare on the internet. We're going to keep going with this. I would love to be moving into the follow-up to last episode, because we have played another session since then, and there was the exciting conclusion and the return to Hill Bottom. But I am going to hold off on sharing with you the exciting tales of that game, because a lot of you in the comments on the last video requested some more info and backstory, specifically about characters and some of the events that led them to their current situation. I also know that many of you are very interested in the methods used by DMs like myself to prep sessions. So I figured this episode, before moving on to the recap of the last session, I would do a bit of a prologue, give you an introduction to my players' characters, and more importantly, do a page by page flip through of my DM journal, the actual literal journal. This book contains every session that we have played in this campaign, and I think this is a great opportunity for me to both recap you on the history of my game, as well as show you my methods for prepping a game and the kind of notes that I use when I'm running it. Now, I'm not going to go into extreme detail on everything, otherwise this would be far too long. I am going to attempt to keep this brief as to stay interesting and only kind of, summarize things and go into detail on stuff that I think may be of use for other DMs. Before moving in and showing you my game notes, I'd like to introduce you to my players' characters, the brave heroes in this campaign that I call Pazimit Unbound. A small, humble village named Hillbottom resides at the base of a vast mountain range not too far inland off the east coast of the great continent of Yadin. This town is, for lack of a better description, boring. You have your farmers, you have your merchants, you have the sawmill, the inn, the taverns, and all the other things, and not too much exciting takes place. This town and the entire world of Yadin exists in a time of great peace. Legend has it, and as is the belief of the followers of the Church of Enora, many, many thousand years ago, the world of Yadin was cloaked in a great darkness. Evil ruled over the land. Demons, devils, abominations, and every dark monster imaginable terrorized the land and Yadin's people. These creatures and these evil forces were ruled by a great and powerful demon named Pazimit, and he burdened the land with much pain and agony. Legend has it that the prayers of the people of Yadin one day were finally answered when the dark sky cracked, and from a great glorious beam of light came down an army of angels, led by the powerful war angel Enora. These angels were sent down to rid the lands of these evil forces, and a great war was fought in the skies and on the land of Yadin. As the scriptures say, this fight ended in an epic battle between the angel Enora herself and the demon Pazimit. They fought around this great stone, a piece of stone that had fallen from Yadin's moon to the ground, a giant silver piece of ore thought to have immense magical properties. In this fight between demon and angel that lasted many months, one battle fought day in and day out for months between these two powerful forces, it finally came to an end when Enora thrust her spear across the sky into Pazamit's chest, impaling him and sending him backwards into this great stone known as the Hellevault. This spear penetrated the stone and created a rift that sucked the demon lord himself inside. But the energy, being so strong, also sucked in Enora. Magic the Gathering fans watching will recognize this as a reskinned imagining of the tale of Avacyn in the world of Innistrad. But that's about the only thing that's similar. With the demon lord Pazamit contained within this Hellevault, slowly the darkness was lifted from the land. And after many, many centuries, a powerful religious organization worshipping Enora was born. And for the most part, the world returned to normal. It was a prosperous time for man. After many, many thousands of years, this story was no longer believed to be fact and was considered lore and superstition, the stories of the devoutly religious. And because life had become so good and safe and complacent in Yadin, people began to lose their faith because they no longer needed it. Now fast forward to present day, Hillbottom. In this town lived 5 souls. There was Awar, the cleric, human. He was essentially a Northman, big, strong, honest, kind, always ready to do the right things and do right by his god. There was Sheena, the female barbarian, who spent most of her days drinking, fighting, and then drinking some more. Bommy, the halfling rogue. There's no better way to describe Bommy than a shit disturber. He's a little asshole. Bommy's greatest joys in life come from mischief. But deep down, Bommy always has the back of his friends in his town. Delilah, the young female sorceress, daughter to the town's alchemist, naive, innocent. She hasn't traveled too far and doesn't know much of the world, but longs for something more in her life. And last, Anno, our female bard. And I think the term bard should be taken with a grain of salt. While Anno has been known to sing a tune and tell a tale, her performances lie mostly in the art of making puns. Anno, you see, is short for annoying. And on our first session, it began with the town being rudely awoken in the middle of the night to screams of parents that they had lost their children. Our adventurers woke and rushed towards the center of town, where a frantic mayor, Lord Deer, was informing the people of what had just happened. Several children from the village had vanished in the night. The only trace left was the symbol of Pazamit, this ancient demon, painted on the door of the homes from which they were taken. Lord Deer pleaded for somebody, anybody, to stand up and do something before it was too late, while there was still time to find these missing children and bring them back home safely to Hillbottom. And with that, 5 simple villagers became heroes. All 5 of them rising to the challenge to bring these children home, each for their own personal reasons. Awar, it was his sense of duty. Sheena was looking for rewards, money to buy more alcohol. Bommy, looking for gold. Why? I don't even know, but probably wasn't a good reason. But either way, he stood up and rose to the challenge. Delilah, knowing her father's debts to the town and the fact that his alchemy shop could soon fall into the ownership of the town to repay these bad debts, decided it was time to leave her humble home for something more exciting with the chance of repaying these debts. And of course, Anno, while wanting a great tale to tell, rose up to the challenge for the simple fact that she loved these children, and she spent many days singing to them and telling them jokes. So with very little clues, they headed north towards the mountains, where somebody thought they saw someone running away in the night. And with that, we began our first session. And now it is time to zoom into the DM journal and to give you a recap of the story thus far. So this is it, my precious year and a half of gameplay. At the beginning of my journal, I actually keep a list of conditions and short form of their effects, levels of exhaustion, short rest, long rest, cover, just things I can quickly glance at if I, want to remember the rules for Petrified. My goal with this journal is to have it be the only book and reference material in front of me when I'm DMing. I keep the other books close by if I need them, but this is the only thing I keep in front of me the whole time. And I try when possible to run an entire session only using this. I don't like to have the monster manual in front of me. I don't like to have any of that stuff, just this. So that is why I keep these quick rules here for reference so I don't have to look them up in the other book. And because I don't use a traditional DM screen that has this information on it. On the other page here, I also have the schools of magic with a brief, explanation of what it is, just because sometimes when detect magic is taking place, I struggle to remember what something should be on the fly. So this is a good reference for if I can't think of what type of magical effect it is, just because I got a bad memory for memorizing that stuff. So anyways, that's on the first page. Opening it up here, I have a random weather table that I use sometimes because Awar, he has spells that are weather dependent and he will often ask me what the weather is, so I will often roll for it. And I'm sure there are other tables that exist, but this is one I made up myself. And here at the beginning, I just have some session notes. 6 a.m. PC's awake to find Hillbottom in a panic as 5 of the town's children have gone missing in the night. And I have the names of the missing children, their race, and who they are the daughter or son of. So we have Eleanor Deer, the daughter of Mayor Lord Deer, Iva, the daughter of Vecker Raybod, Raiden, daughter of Duralid Goldenbuckle, and Tamer and Aldwin, brothers, sons of Arbane Tree Splitter. And I also have little notes of who each of those people are. So like Vecker Raybod, he is the owner of the flour mill. Duralid Goldenbuckle is the owner of the Careful Owl Inn. Arbane Tree Splitter is the owner of the lumber mill. So what's important is that all of these children were the kids of prominent, wealthy business owners in the town. The symbol of Pazimit was painted on the doors, like I mentioned, and some notes about Lord Deer and what he might say to try to convince the people to help. One important thing about each of the individuals whose kids were taken is that they all are widowers. Is widower the appropriate name for a male who's lost his spouse? Either way, they all had their wives die over the years under mysterious circumstances. So that was another thing that tied them all together. But the session really began when they headed off and went on the trail looking for the missing kids. The trail led them to the Moaning Meer, which is a swampy, kind of dead area with an old cemetery, very spooky. And this is a place that, you know, the kids in the town dare each other to go to, but never would. What did I say here? This is a place of legend, a place people would not openly talk about, but that children would share scary stories about. Sounds of moaning and pain cries can be heard from the direction that cannot be pinpointed. So it's a haunted place, no longer used to rest the dead, that no one goes about and adults don't talk about. And for our party ending up here on the edge of this mire, it was the first time they'd ever been there, and they recalled the, you know, stories and songs that were told growing up about it. And this here was the first ever session that I ever ran for D&D, and this was the first encounter. So I made a big board for it, 2 boards. It was like 2 feet by 4 feet with my little first building ever built, the chapel. The way I set it up was that each kind of zone was numbered and each zone had something of note. So there was a pond right near the entryway where there were some twig blights disguised as branches around the pond. And really this was me just learning to do combat. So it's not really that amazing or anything. In one of these other ponds, there's, you know, something in the water, you know, potions of healing and a rusty shovel. There was another spot here that if they crossed it, the PCs will sink into black tar if they do not use the fallen log to cross. Some more twig blights. And then as they approach the tombstones, of course, zombies, because, I mean, it's your first time running D&D, put some zombies in there. And then there's the old church with the symbol of Pazimit also painted above the door. So a clue as to where these kids may have been taken. So eventually, you know, they fought some twig blights, they fought some zombies, and it was a bunch of awkward, you know, DMing because I was still learning. And then eventually they got into the church. And inside the church, it was empty other than one coffin. The coffin appeared very old and dusty. I vaguely remember, I think they opened it up and looked inside and there was a body belonging to an ancient relative of Lord Deer. The royal family had a signet of some kind, and I think Bommy stole, yes, Bommy definitely stole like a ring from the body while no one was looking because he's a little asshole. They moved the coffin and there was a hole in the floor, and like good adventurers, they jumped down and they descended into the crypts below the church. And this was my first dungeon that I designed myself. And I thought it was pretty neat because it was a series of rooms that led into one large chamber that was shaped like a coffin. And I thought that was pretty neat. And when I actually ran this game, I did it in Scotty's 2.5D Next style, where I just had big boards, big tiles, like 2 foot by 2 foot tiles and modular walls. And it allowed me to do something weird like this coffin room, but I did find it kind of a pain in the ass to set up and a little bit awkward to play in because the walls moved and whatever. So, you know, I strayed away from this method fairly quickly, but it worked for the time. Each one of these rooms, you know, had a different threat. One had some kind of like fungusy gas spores that if they were disturbed would let out gas. And of course, Sheena, being the, you know, not too bright or cautious of people, went right in them, slashed them, got sick from them. Then there was a room that had a stone table. It was like the embalming room, and it had fresh blood stains and chains hanging from the ceiling and a bunch of shelves with different tools and instruments. In one of the other rooms, there was a coffin that contained a specter, and another room had a coffin that contained one of 3 different things. It actually wasn't a static monster that was in there. It was dependent on who was in the room at the time. And I don't have it in this note because it was on a separate page. There was a whole system of doors here, like these 2 coffin rooms had portcullis kind of doors, and there was different switches, and there was a door to this big chamber here. And it was my first puzzle design where one button had to be pressed, but continually held down while the next button was pressed. Like, if you pressed the button, the door would open, but as soon as you released it, it would close. So someone had to hold this one, and this one only worked if this one was held, and there was buttons inside. So I don't remember the specific mechanics of it, but essentially it involved, a few people being in certain places at certain times in a, sequence to make the doors work. And that created a situation where different party members were kind of split in different rooms. When there was a threat, if someone ran to help them, they would release their button, closing certain doors. And anyway, I thought it was pretty interesting, and it was kind of fun, especially as a new DM. It seemed elaborate and interesting. But in this one room, depending on how they did things, there could be a varying amount of people in the room. So I set it up so that if there was 3 PCs in the room, 1 white would rise from the coffin. If there was 2 PCs, the coffin would be a mimic, and if there was 1 PC, it would just be some skeletons. They eventually got into this large chamber here, hearing different chanting in I don't know, it was probably Abyssal or something. And inside this room, there was a whole bunch of cultists and a flaming circle and a priest doing some kind of ritual, and the children were encircled by a ring of fire. And basically battle ensued, and it was tough, and they eventually managed to fight their way through it and rescue these kids, and they had their first victory. So session 3, I should say actually that the Moaning Meer and the lead up was one session. The catacombs, that was a session in and of itself. And then session 3, begin to head home. But I had the session start with a specter in the catacombs showing up and aggressively attacking Bommy and calling him a thief because he had stolen that jewelry. Then they head back home. As they are approaching town, I just needed an encounter and I wanted something outside. So as they got to these old ruins, one of an ancient church of Enora, in the sky they saw a manticore chasing a peryton. I can't remember how I ran it, but essentially it was like, they can't kill a manticore. Maybe there's 2 perytons. Yeah, 2. They can't kill a manticore, and the manticore's hungry, looking for prey. And one of the peryton attacked the party, I think. Peryton will attack PCs. Manticore will not if PCs do not attack it. So basically, they could just avoid this, run away or whatever. If they attacked the manticore stupidly, they would get killed by him. But what they ended up doing actually was they shot down one of these, big birds and had a dialogue with the manticore, and basically it was like, here, eat this, we're cool, whatever. And they made friends with the manticore, so that was fun. Anyways, they finally get back to town. They go to the town hall where all the parents and people are anxiously waiting, and they return these kids to their parents. And it's a great, wonderful thing. But just as the kids are, hugging their fathers, their eyes turn white, roll back into their head, and they start biting and attacking their parents. And shit just got totally crazy. I wanted to force the party into this awkward situation where they had these kids they just rescued, but the kids were viciously attacking their parents. So they had to do something about it, but should they kill the kids? Because are they just possessed? What's going on? And I just wanted to see what they would do. There was a PC there who was basically the right-hand man to the mayor, who, during all this started crying sorry, and some of the party picked up on that. Odivius, the seer, who is basically the town psychic, and he bursts in and yells that these are not the real children. At that point, the PCs had been trying to subdue the kids, and it was really chaotic. And when they got this kind of, they're not the real children, they slaughtered them. And Yoan, the guy who is like sobbing during this and saying sorry, crawls out a window and starts to run away. The PCs burn the bodies of the children. Odivius tells the PCs that he had a vision that the real kids were in the belly of a wolf. He believes this to mean that they may be in Fardan. This is a town that is north of the mountains where people of the Wolf clan live. They're known lycanthropes. So he believes that this vision of the wolves must be connected to them. So the players take a rest at the inn, before they head out. And in the morning, the town priest comes in bloody and beaten, stating that in the night, while this was going on with these children, that the temple had been robbed and some valuable relics that he was protecting were stolen. And he goes on to tell them that these relics were shards of the broken spear of the angel Enora. Very, very important relics, specifically because the legend has it, if these shards were to be reassembled and used to impale the Hellvault that contains Enora and the demon Pazimit, it could shatter it and open it up and release them both onto the world again. This priest had been secretly hiding them in this nondescript little town for all this time, and now they had been taken. Before they leave town, they do some investigating because Johan Fisk was acting very suspicious and ran away in the night, so they went and checked out his house. And in the house, they found a journal that went from normal writings into just like random crazy person writing of not my fault, not my fault, not my fault, over and over and over and over again. The whole house was covered in holy symbols over the doors and windows, like different words of protection. And under the bed, they found a large symbol of Pazimit that had been drawn in salt. And the PCs head north towards the mountains to find the mine that shortcuts to the other side. So essentially there's this huge mountain range, and in discussion with people in the town, going around them would take months. Going through or over them would take several weeks. But there is an old abandoned mine that's the shortcut. I know, super original. It was a way to get the players into a mine. So they get to the mine entrance, and outside they found there was a camp set up and there were some knolls. And in order to get to the mine, they had to get through them first. And these knolls had a human prisoner tied up to a stake in the ground. So they fought the knolls, freed this guy who turned out to be a farmer. And he said that, a few days ago, knolls had swarmed his settlement. And in the raid, women were killed, but children were taken by some robed figures that looked like they may be cultists. So anyways, they rescued him, sent them on the way, got another lead about these cultists. And then they eventually enter the mine. And this mine, when they walked in, it was basically a shaft that went straight down with different offshoots from it. And there was a crane and a rope that they were able to descend down on. Essentially, each room had different things. I had more notes on these separately and a big map, and at this point I was still using cue cards for each room, so I don't have here all of the specifics, but it was just a grindy dungeon of different things. But there was kind of two ways out, and up here, which was one of the first places they found, there was a pile of skeletons belonging to miners that were all dead, and they came back to life, of course, and fought the party. They also found a box there that contained some kind of weird purple stone. They got into an opening where they found this weird burial chamber. Inside there's this coffin, and the spirit rose from it, and they actually started talking to it and managed to role play some good dialogue with him. And he was the spirit of a man named Helvin Daybringer. It says his spirit speaks to players and tells them he was a commander in Enora's army during the Great Holy War. So this was basically the first time something was telling the players that these old stories, this folklore, this religious tale was real. This spirit was like, yo guys, I was there. I fought in this war. He tells them more about the legend and that it's very real. He tells them that his body was laid here so that his spirit could protect something called the Devil's Stone. It's a powerful portal that allows creatures to pass to and from the nine hells. This is where the portals episode came up and why I built a portal. After the party tells him that they're out to save these children, that these cultists have been sighted, that they're symbols of Pazimit, he gets worried and, he realizes that they have to fight this good fight and stop this uprising before it gets out of hand. So he actually awards the players with some pretty cool artifacts. He gives them a set of ornate silver shackles that can bind any foe or fiend. He gives them some goggles of night, basically goggles that give them night vision. And he gives them this is the thing that becomes important throughout the campaign, the Horn of Enora, which is a reskinned, I think it's called Horn of Valhalla. But basically it's this horn that they can blow once a week, and 1d4 spirit warriors appear and fight for them. So a really powerful get out of jail free card, so to speak. They continue upwards and they actually come out into an opening in the mountain face, but they find this weird portal stone, and they do a bunch of detect magic and decipher runes and blah, blah, blah. And it turns out that it has these runes on it that translated to 1 in, 1 out. They decide to throw a rock in it, and as the rock goes in, a closet appears, and they realize, like, holy crap, anything that goes in here, something else comes out. And if a rock generates a closet, what happens if you put like something like an animal or a person or a child into this? But there's really not much they can do from here. It just is kind of something to kind of worry them, especially because this opening here opens out onto the world, and who knows what could have been flowing out of this thing. So anyways, they descend back down, go through some different rooms, fight some different things, run ass past these skeletons, get down, and they get to the bottom here where there is a nest, a lair of spider, and it was like a phase spider, and that's why I made spider eggs. And I can't remember if they actually fought their way through it or if they just managed to, in the fight, destroy the webs that were blocking this entrance and flee out. But either way, they got out. So moving on to session 6, they get to the other side of the mountains and they follow this old abandoned road, and they eventually pass a little farm. This farm is under attack by a few quasits, just like the little bastard that they saw come out of this thing. And they are attacking this house, and they have set some hay bales on fire. The heroes fight these quasits. This was my first time trying to do Hankerin from Drunken and Dragons timer. And I had a timer, like a D4 timer, that the haystacks that were on fire would spread to another haystack and eventually spread closer to the house. And it was kind of funny because as they were fighting these quasits, they got the husband, wife, and child into the house, into safety while they were fighting. But right after they got them in, the roof sets on fire. They have to get them out. Anyways, in the end, they were victorious, and the farmers, obviously quite thankful, sheltered them for the night, fed them well, and more importantly, gave them a bunch of information about the area and Fardan and the wolf people essentially in this place. The PCs arrive in Fardan, which is, it looks like a Viking town. They are, it says, met with distrust. Anno, sings a song to get them in, blah, 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 blah. They eventually make good with these people. The chieftain of this clan tells them that actually their own village had just been recently raided by a group of what he called Bloodfangers. And what he explains is that these people, they are lycanthropes, but they embrace their curse, they control it. But certain people in their tribe are unable to control the curse, and it drives them crazy. So they are banished to this place called Old Fardan, which is the ruins of the once great city of Fardan, and they are left to live out their curse there in these ruins. Apparently they came in and they raided the town. But anyways, they go back and they arrive at the entrance of Old Fardan, and outside there was an elaborate setup where there was a camp of these bloodfangers. It was a big bloodbath fight. So then they finally get to the entrance of this place. It is a rock face that has a giant wolf stone carving as the door. You enter under the belly of this wolf, and they recall vision that Odivius the seer had. Think, yep, this must be the place, belly of the wolf. So they get inside, and this place was, I stole it from somewhere and then just adjusted it. It is a weird dungeon that is a series of 3 spinning rooms. You know, they enter, and then after a certain amount of time, everything spins. So there would be like hallway connections that sometimes would dead end and then would line up. And it was just a really crazy place. And I wish I still had it. I created a 3-layer map for myself with a spinner. So every round or whatever it was I was doing, I could spin it so I would know exactly what the current settings of the place were. Inside the spinning labyrinth, the party spends hours trying to find their way around. They ended up fighting some werewolves, and the big turning point, important part of this kind of area is that Awar becomes bitten by a werewolf and begins his curse of lycanthropy. And at one point, the Horn of Honora is blown to save their sorry hides. So after going through this mazy labyrinth of different places, they eventually run into Johan Fisk, the guy that had escaped into the night and whose house they had investigated. And they learn that he had fallen under the control of a succubus who had been making him do terrible things against his will, and he admits that he himself was the one that killed the wives of all these prominent individuals. He couldn't help it, and there was a lot of interesting role-playing back and forth between them and him, but in the end they eventually killed him for his crimes. So that was kind of a dark turning point for the party. And the party eventually gets to the center chamber, this round room, and in the center is this glowing white stone that looks like it had impacted and fallen from the sky. On the floor, there are the shards of Honora, and they are laid out looking like someone has been trying to put the puzzle back together. A succubus appears, there's some dialogue back and forth, but basically she doesn't waste much time trying to dispatch the party. There's also 2 big large stones flanking a doorway that each have a black orb, and I had it set up so that the succubus could place her hand on these orbs, speak a word, and it would cause different effect. Now, something I should point out is that these notes up to this point, I was not yet fully using the notebook. I had other notes put out, and this is more just a journal of a recap and different things. So all the mechanics aren't here. It hits a certain point where I begin using the book alone. So if you're wondering why some of this is more just recap stuff in the book and no mechanics or tracking, that's why. But anyways, there was some kind of mechanics where she would say a word and then energy or whatever would come out from this orb and create a bunch of damage, blah, blah, blah. They eventually kill her. They come into this here where the kids are in a cage, and they finally rescue them and head back home towards Hillbottom. I'm realizing that this recap is taking much longer than I thought it would. So I think I'm going to pause, and we will continue the rest of the story in another episode. If you guys liked this, and you like this series, and you sat through this whole thing and all my rambling, please hit the like button and drop me a comment letting me know that you enjoyed it, because literally the only reason I followed through and am doing more of these DM diaries is because so many people put in the comments for the first one that they enjoyed it and they wanted more. This recap may not be as exciting as the first one and may not show as much about the mechanics, but bear with me. We're going to get through this little bit of history. We're going to lead to more notes of mechanics and proper DM prep, and then we can move forward. You'll be all caught up and up to speed. Future sessions will make a lot more sense. All right, guys, again, Thanks for watching. I will see you again next time.